All right, welcome back. That was great. I hope you all thought that was great as well. I certainly have found the time that we've had together to be really inspirational and educational, and now we get a chance to be even more inspired and more educated. So it's time to take any questions that you have. Certainly, I'll just say, I took away from that video and the conversations we have just so many positive things about limited equity co-ops. The fact that it's number one, affordable and permanently affordable is probably the most important thing, but it really obviously is so much more than that, that it's a community. It's like a family. We heard both in the video and from Adjoa talking about it, like a marriage, place of where you can find affordable, healthy food, a place that can support your child's development, a place that can give you the opportunity to pursue a career that is not necessarily driven by having to pay an incredibly high mortgage or rent. Again, super inspiring. So if you have questions, you can put them in the chat. I believe that if you have a question where you also want to speak because it's a little more complicated, you can do that as well. Oh, we're getting a no from Trisha. Yes. So we'll just take your questions through the chat. And I'm just gonna, and I will relay them. So I do have a question of my own, which is just a matter of clarification for all of us. And maybe I'll just also remind us that, on this panel, we've got people with experience in creating and pulling together limited equity co-ops and finding the people to be in that intentional community. We have the people who build and finance affordable housing and people who provide legal assistance, like the full range of folks. So any question is totally going to be great. But my question is just to make sure everyone understands what it means when you say limited equity co-op, because you, Linda, talked about market rate co-ops versus limited equity co-ops, and limited equity is what makes it affordable. So if someone could just explain, anybody on the panel, what makes a limited equity co-op limited equity? What does that mean for someone who's buying in? What does that mean for somebody who is selling their share of the co-op? And how is that critical to both helping them build some equity, but also keeping the co-op affordable in the long term?
I'll do that. So limited equity means that you don't really make any money. Like if you own a house, the longer you have it, you build up equity in that house, and it's worth a lot more after a while. Well, we don't build up a whole lot of equity. The equity really could be just the fact that you have a place to stay. Like for what we do, like when somebody pays their fee, pay like a fee. I forget what it was in the beginning, but it's like $3,000 now to be a member. And so that money goes into an account and we earn interest on that. So if you decide to leave, then your equity is only about a small percentage plus a $50 for you to get back once you leave. So you don't have any value that you take with you. If, say, like with market rate, you can, if the co-op appreciates, then, and if it started off worth $1 million, and when you leave, it's worth 10 million, you've built up, that much equity. But that's not the case with limited equity, because the whole purpose is to make housing affordable. So your equity really is in having a place to stay, a cheap place to stay. Anybody want to add anything?
No. Great, that's super helpful, and it's certainly helpful for me, and I assume for the other people listening as well. So the issue here is you own your home and you have all the rights of home ownership and the tax and other benefits of home ownership. What you miss out on is the equity gain, but that is what's necessary to make sure that your building and every other co-op remains affordable, not just to the current tenants, but to future owners as well. And without that limited equity component, eligible Baker would someday not be affordable to anybody, and that's obviously contrary to the goal. So I know there was one question, a very specific question about whether you can use a Section 8 voucher, housing choice voucher, to buy a share in the co-op, and I wonder if anybody has an answer to that.
Yes, I believe we still do that. We do have some units that are very, very low, or most of them are very low. They're very, very low income. And so I'm not up on the latest with that, but that was something that was able to be done. I understand there's been some changes in Section 8, but definitely it can be done as a general rule. And I think so in our co-op. And you can, when you organize your own, you can make sure that that's one of the things that you make happen.
Great. Is there anybody else who wants to add to that? All right. Well, so we had a couple questions I see now in the chat about tenants purchasing their buildings, making it a limited equity co-op, and what opportunities are upcoming. And Paul, that was from Joseph about upcoming opportunities. I don't know if that's from DC or not, but I think maybe some other folks on the call, on the panel, can help elaborate that. In fact, it is often in the District of Columbia, at least, when a building is up for sale, that the opportunity for a co-op happens because of the law that we have here that allows tenants, gives tenants the first opportunity to purchase their building. Maybe someone also on the panel can talk about how financial assistance through the city's Housing Production Trust Fund in particular is part, and I know Roseanne, you talked about the co-ops often having, starting with some subsidy from the city. Talk about how that is part of the process in helping tenants actually buy their building, because saying you can buy your building is one thing, saying you can afford to buy your building when it goes up for sale is something different.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So typically the way this starts is if tenants are living in a building and their landlord decides that they would like to sell their building, or they might even have already signed a sales contract with somebody else. And under the DC law, the tenants have a right to organize themselves and express their interest in purchase, and they can match that other contract, effectively allowing the tenant association to kind of jump ahead of that other buyer. And they have enough time to try and organize themselves and find other, technical consultants who can help them with that. I know that the AU Clinic has done that. There are also organizations like Housing Counseling Services and the Latino Economic Development Corporation who help tenants get organized. And basically it's to preserve your rights. And once you kind of jump in line there, then you have time to try and find a developer. Oftentimes tenants would like to stay as being tenants, and they have that choice. Or other times they would like to create a cooperative or a condominium. They have that choice too. And so they can basically assign the rights that they have under the DC statute to a developer, who in turn guarantees that they're either going to be guaranteed a certain rent level or a limited or a co-op fee if they choose a co-op, or a sale price if they choose a condo. And they also get a guaranteed scope of work for any kind of renovation that needs to be done in the building in exchange for assigning their rights to the developer. And that's basically how the legal scope of work protects tenants who would otherwise be kicked out of their homes if the landlord sells the building.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Roseanne. I don't know, Sanana and Carly, if you guys are involved in any current efforts with tenants who are trying to buy their buildings, whether that's happening now or not. But
as far as I'm aware, I don't believe that we are. We're constantly getting new clients within the clinic, so it's possible that some of them are rotating in. But at this time, I don't believe there's anything of that sort.
okay. Great, but it's part of what you do, and so it's certainly an opportunity that a tenant association, if they're ready, could contact you to get some assistance. It sounds like that's great.
And if I can say right quick, this is Linda. That is the primary organizing that I did back in the day with residents whose property was up for sale and they were facing eviction. And most of the properties that eventually became cooperative that I work with, that I organize around, were organized as a result of them facing that kind of sellout. I can remember having demonstrations at the bank, the German bank, where these folks from other countries were purchasing the property here in DC and kicking our folks out. So that was part of the work that I did in terms of community organizing.
Great. Thank you, Linda. And I do think this is like an important point, just for those who are on the call who are not in the District of Columbia. So the law that we've been referring to, Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, is a really strong tenant right that says when a building goes up for sale, the owner has to first offer it to the tenants, to the tenant association at market rate. They don't have to offer it to sell it at any different price than they would sell it to anybody else. And then the tenants, if they form an association or already have one, have a certain amount of time to gather the legal financial help to buy the building, and potentially, as we've talked about, pull in some financial assistance from the city. So if you don't have a tenant purchase law wherever you are, that's an important part of helping support limited equity co-ops, and just an important tenant right, period, a really important thing. I see in the chat that Eleanor Hart has said that the chair of the DC Council Committee on Housing and Economic Development will be introducing legislation to provide tax abatements for limited equity co-ops. So that's good news. I don't know. I mean, it looked like from the work that the clinic has done, there's already been some legislation to support favorable tax treatment of co-ops, but maybe there's even more. Eleanor, if you want to add a little bit more into the chat, that's great, but also just good for all of us to know that it is happening. So another question that's come in from Alan is about affordable. What does affordable mean in the concept of limited equity co-ops? Because in affordable housing program, it's often 30% of your income is what's the contribution, or that's what's defined as affordable housing. And so I'm wondering, any of the panelists can talk to us about how do you make sure that Ella-Jo Baker or any co-op is affordable for the people who live there, and how is that a matter of how you select tenants? Is the rate that everybody pays the same based on the size of their unit? Is there any adjustment for income or for people who have a change in income?
So we had one building that was dedicated to very, very low income. No, it was the opposite. It was for a person that was slightly above, or anybody that was especially slightly above, but most of the people were low income. I don't remember all those details in the beginning, but our carrying charges are just based on a set rate for the bedrooms, not by square footage or income or anything like that, except for that one building where people who made a little bit more than the definition of low income, or very, very low income. I've forgotten all those details, you know.
Yeah.
But
So
maybe Roseanne is more
Yeah.
versed in the current stuff.
Well, what happened initially was that there were some folks within Ella-Jo Baker that, had been working together, like Audra and Linda described, and they were a little bit over the income limit allowed under the DC government programs. And so we didn't want to exclude any of those folks. And so we designated one building that folks that were a little bit over the DC income limits would be able to stay in that building. And then we'd still be able to get the DC money for the other buildings. And that's how we worked that out. So no one got excluded from being able to move in.
Thank you.
yeah, so maybe just building off that, Roseanne, what I think I heard you say is it does sound like there is an income eligibility requirement to join Ella-Jo Baker, and there was another question about what happens when somebody leaves. So can someone talk about, if you have an empty unit and you're looking for a new member of the co-op, is there an income test or income limit for people generally to join the co-op or other limited equity co-ops?
There is, but I don't know what the current limits are now. I haven't been involved in that process in a while. But you know, we have a waiting list. We very seldom have people who leave. But you know, we do maintain a waiting list, and you have to go through an interview, and we rate you, and you know, make decisions on who would be the best person. You know, once your income is approved, and then you are offered a place. But yeah, I don't think we have had very many.
No.
People don't go. Well, given how nice it sounds, I can see why that is the case. So just to make sure that it sounds like what I'm hearing is if a unit ever becomes available, there are income eligibility requirements, but really the affordability is just the fact that the units are so inexpensive, $850 for a 1-bedroom, if I heard you right, and up to $1,050 for a 3-bedroom. Clearly that is well below market for where you are now, and just well below market for the district as a whole. And doing the math of 30% of income, those are income ranges of $34,000 to roughly $40,000. So that is, you know, not the lowest income in the district, but certainly low and moderate income families. Great. Well, keep the questions coming, and thank you, Eleanor, for that clarification in the chat. Hope that legislation moves forward better this time around than last. So you said that people tend to stay. The waiting list is long and hasn't changed very much, but we have had some questions that have come up about what happens when someone is either unable or unwilling to continue the obligations of what it means to be a member of the co-op and that participation. If somebody's income rises, if for whatever reason they're not following the rules, like what is the process, and have you had to ask somebody to leave?
I don't think. Okay, so the process is that you know, any member could bring an issue to the board, and the person, if it involves a person, they can come to a hearing, and things are discussed, and then the membership votes to terminate the membership. And I think it's we give them 30 days to leave. I haven't looked at that in a while, but so yeah, we haven't had to ask anybody to leave, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Well, we had to file a suit against one member some time ago. In fact, it was a serious conflict for me because the person was someone I brought in and someone who was a good friend. But then when that person did not pay her carrying charges, I was affected by that. And so the co-op had to take her to court. And so I went down to the court with her, and I wasn't sure where I should sit. Should I sit with her or should I sit with the co-op members? So it was a serious conflict, but the judgment was in our favor because she had not been paying and needed to pay and had to leave if she was not going to pay, and finally did leave.
Yeah. But that sounds like a pretty high success rate if it's just one person that you can remember.
Oh yes.
In all this time, which, you know, I think is a one thing I just wanted to interject at some point is that limited equity co-ops are I think fall in the range of a concept that I heard in the last few years called social housing, right? So we all have certainly tossed around the concept of affordable housing, but social housing, as I understand it, goes beyond that, and it really is intended to be a complete alternative to the market-based housing, you know, where it's just a commodity where somebody owns it and is trying to make money off it. That social housing is affordable, yes, for sure, but it also respects the dignity of the tenants and is operated in a democratic way where the tenants are helping set the rules. And it's just a great model in limited equity co-ops of creating social housing, an alternative to the market, and something that we should keep promoting. There was a question in the chat about what happens when you pay off the mortgage, what that will mean for your finances, what that will mean for the members of the co-op. Can you help us understand that?
Well, it's a nice position to be in. But when we first started our articles, one of the things that we wanted to do was to create more housing co-ops. So maybe that would be something that we could do. We have been talking about creating a senior co-op for seniors. Many of us are getting older, and so that was one idea we were throwing out there, but we really don't know. We haven't talked about it. We certainly would have to maintain a reserve fund, because as the building deteriorates, it's going to probably need more work. So yeah, it would be an interesting issue, interesting problem to have. Paid off mortgage.
A dream someday.
Yeah.
Yes. Great. Well, thank you, Audra, for that answer. I looking at, and I don't see additional questions in the chat right now. So there was certainly a broad question that I think everybody on the panel could potentially answer in their own way, which is just for this. And if there's anybody watching today, or anyone watching who knows somebody who might be interested in getting started on a limited equity co-op, whether it's here or somebody else, I'm just sort of curious, what advice do you have about how and where to get started on all the different angles of what it takes to create a limited equity co-op?
Well, I certainly would encourage people to read their city's comprehensive plan. And that's I think 20 to 30 year look at what the city is planning to do in the future. So you will get an idea of the areas of your city that not that well developed, run down, and go in and try to negotiate with the city to buy some of that property. And the buildings that we got 6 houses, and they were boarded up, and the whole neighborhood had really become like a drug haven. And drug addicts were breaking into the houses and using them, as crack houses. And so we were able to talk to the city and say, hey, give them to us and let us turn them into affordable housing. And since the city had no plans and weren't doing anything, we were able to get them. So a similar thing could be done wherever you're living. Scope out, abandoned houses. And, I look at Baltimore, and it's like rows and rows and rows, or blocks and blocks of housing that's not being used. And places like that should be able to approach the city and say, give them to us. Find some nonprofit developers, some foundations that would help you get funds and figure out ways to do some creative fundraising, and get people in there with some sweat equity to create affordable housing for yourselves and for future generations. And there are, different groups. One of the things when we started, so many people wanted us to help them do the same thing we had done, but we were so limited. It was, 15 of us. We were working. Some people had children. We had our own issues trying to develop the co-op. So we just didn't have the wherewithal to help other people too much. We did what we could, but I would love to see, and it's needed wherever there are co-ops, a limited equity federation in DC that's really functional. I tried to do that, but it just didn't work out. And there's a lot of issues with that. But they could be like a resource to other co-ops to keep everybody afloat in the city and share resources like management companies and stuff like that. So, basically find your property, approach the city government, and then organize to help support all co-ops, housing co-ops, worker co-ops, consumer co-ops, all those kinds of things. Build a co-op ecosystem in your city.
Let me just say, if Roseanne is still here, let me say thank you to Roseanne and to Manor for their assistance in helping us get ownership of the property, because most of it was owned by Manor, and they were very open to working with us to allow us the opportunity to purchase the property and establish it at a housing for people who still do not have a whole lot of money. And just one other point I'd like to make is let's be clear when we use the word affordable. Let's be clear on what we're talking about, because affordable could be applied to anybody around anything. But when we're talking about low and moderate income people, I think that's what we have to keep in mind.
Well, thank you, Linda, for your very kind words. I've been at Manna for 26 years and I have developed, hundreds of buildings, but Ella Jo Baker has always, hands down, been my favorite. And I really enjoyed working with you all.
Thank you, Roseanne. Yeah, same here.
Great. Roseanne and maybe Carly and Sanan, can you also say at what point should a tenants group that's interested in becoming a limited equity co-op, what point should they come to you all?
As soon as possible, as soon as you get that TOPA notice. Most all of the projects that Manna works on right now are all TOPA projects working with tenants. So as soon as you get that notice, talk to organizing groups like Housing Counseling Services. They'll help you get organized, and then talk to Manna. We are always looking to work with tenant groups to help them.
Great. Carly and Sanan, anything to add?
I would probably say the same. Where our legal clinics and a lot of the work that we can do can be helpful from the outset. And as I said, we just want to support, even if it's not the legal side of things. So we know that there will be legal needs in the future. So willing to support even before then as well.
Great. Well, and just to make sure everyone remembers that the Bernie Book Club website with the information on this panel has the speakers, their bios, and contact information if you need to reach out as well. I see we're getting somewhat close to the end, but if take a few more questions. One question, I don't know if anybody on the panel knows the answer, is where else in the country beyond the District of Columbia that states recognize limited equity co-ops as a form of housing?
New York. I think
New York, yes.
Yes, it's like the #1 city with limited equity cooperatives, with cooperative period, but limited equity cooperatives in particular. Yeah.
It's an interesting question. I think we probably need some research on that. I know you have in New York does some work, but it would be good to do some national organizing to make that information more readily available. We would love to do something geo.coop to help facilitate that, because that's a resource that our movement definitely needs.
Yeah. Are you able to type that into the chat so that people can see? Yeah, that would be great. So we did have a question about whether there's a way for more people to see this program, and that's maybe for Molly or someone else to talk about whether this program will be shared more broadly.
Yes, it will be, definitely.
Oh, great.
We'll have it up on YouTube, and people can go, as you said, to the website berniebookclub.com.
Great. So Roseanne, I have a question that, thank you, Adjoa. Question for you about scattered site properties that Manna has acquired and what you're planning to do with them. This was a question that indirectly came through Tricia, so Tricia can elaborate a little bit if that didn't make sense.
Can you elaborate, Tricia?
Well, I will, yeah. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. The reason why we invited Roseanne, because she's phenomenal and so is Manna and did so much to help us. But the role of the nonprofit developer, we got that property from Manna. And that's what I want people to understand, because it's such a critical time that we need to create affordable home ownership. Manna gets property like Roseanne described. They were able to get that property from the city and develop it to create affordable home ownership or housing. Some people want, we go back and forth. But I would also like to ask you, Ed, to talk a little bit about the Housing Production Trust Fund and the possibility of nonprofit developers such as Manna. They're our favorite, but as she mentioned, there are a couple more that through the approval of the budget, we might be able to do some more things.
Yeah, thank you for that reminder, and appreciate that opportunity. So here in the District of Columbia, one of the major tools to develop affordable housing and to support limited equity co-ops in particular is what's known as the Housing Production Trust Fund, which provides grants and loans to developers, often nonprofit developers like Manna, not to finance the full cost of constructing affordable housing, but to be that gap financing to cover the cost between what they normally can gather. And it helps generate a lot of affordable housing, and every dollar invested is now generating, I believe, $3 or $4 in private financing as well. Developers then go and build rental or for sale housing and then rent it to low and moderate income tenants with long-term affordability requirements. And I think Trish is asking it because it is the source of support, has been, for limited equity co-ops. It's not a mandatory part of the trust fund, but it's an important part. And the program that, I don't know if Eligible Baker, this is where you got assistance, but the city has a program called First Right Purchase, where they use Housing Production Trust Fund money to support tenant groups who are ready to buy their building and just need a little financial help. And I think the reason it's particularly topical right now is that the district's budget for this year, which just started yesterday, has a record amount of funding for the Housing Production Trust Fund. Thanks to the Federal Relief Act that passed in March, the city used a big portion of that to increase the Housing Production Trust Fund, putting in a $250 million contribution, which is a record amount by far in the city, which means that if buildings are going up for sale and tenants want to use their rights, and Manna or LEDC or Housing Counseling Services or SEED are there to help tenants, they should be able to appeal to the city for financial help to support that tenant purchase. But it does require knowing that it's there and appealing to the city. And I don't know if there's anybody on the call, on the panel, who can elaborate any further, but I also see that we're needing to wrap up in a minute. Yeah, I don't know if anyone can, Roseanne or Carly or Sanan, if a tenant group is ready to buy their building and needs financial help, can they just reach directly out to the Department of Housing and Community Development to see if they can seek funding from the city?
Well, you're right. This is the ideal time because the mayor, just announced 400 million is the total amount that they just put out in a funding request. So this is certainly the time to try and find money to develop the affordable housing. If you live in, an apartment building, I'd suggest the first step is Housing Counseling Services or LEDC to help you organize. And that's what gets you to the table. It preserves your rights to then, decide what you want to do and who you'd want to work with. That's the most important thing they need to do, is preserve their rights that way.
Great. Thank you so much. Well, I see that it is 1 o'clock, so I'm going to say thank you to Adjoa and Linda and Roseanne and Carly and Sanan and Molly. I don't know if there's any wrap-up words that you want to say. I appreciate everyone being here today. As I said at the beginning, I thought it'd be fun and educational and inspiring, and it certainly was for me. I hope it was for you too.
Thank you so much, Ed. Thank you, all of our panelists. This has been so educational for me, and I hope for everybody watching too. And yes, I just wanted to say that if anybody here is interested in learning more or in helping us, the Bernie Book Club is likely going to be trying to get the word out about the LEC movement more and more, because we just really believe it's so crucial. And so if there's anybody interested in helping with that effort, we would welcome your help. Or if you are seeking counseling help on developing your own LEC, we are able to connect you, and help you with that. And we also it has been a labor of love to get this off the ground today, and we do plan to do more of these kind of things, but we would appreciate if you would like to contribute to that effort. We have an Indiegogo that I will share. Even any amount, even $5, we would greatly appreciate to help us do more of this and ensure that more people are housed. So there's that link. And I just want to thank everybody for being here, and thank our group, Tricia Kinch, Kathy Staub, Catherine Stearns, Michael Saab, myself, and the support from Peter Chen as well. And it has really been a pleasure to work with all of you. And I want to say a special personal thank you to Tricia Kinch, whose vision and whose effort are behind every single part of this event, and who is just an inspiration to me every day with the way that she leads with wisdom and with her whole heart. So thank you, Tricia. And
thank you, Molly. And thank you everyone for joining us.
all right. Wonderful.
Take care, everyone, and be safe.
Bye.
If you need anything, go to BernieBookClub.com. It's all up there.
That's right. All right. Thank you, Elle. Nice picture. That's Tricia back in the day.
Oh my God.
All right. Enjoy your day. Thank you all. Bye-bye.